Hey, this is Randy Dawson with PMsquare. What we're going to do today is take a look at Incorta. And what I really want to do is put a claim to the test, which says we can get up and running very quickly. I think they say an hour. Let's see if we can't get up and running a bit more quickly than that. What I'm going to do is do this in real time. So you can see I'm on the home page. I'm going to click on that Start for Free button that we see in the upper right. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to have Incorta kick off an instance for us and put it to the test, like I said. Um, I'm not going to use any real world data because I don't want to expose that data out here in a recorded session. But I do want to get some at least real world or somewhat likely volumes of data. So the criteria I'm going to set for myself here for this test is I want to get at least 150 million rows. If all goes according to plan, I should wind up with about 160 million, but at least 150. I'm going to use that as a good round number to test with. All right. I want to pull that from different sources. In other words, I don't want to just start pushing things from an Excel sheet on my desktop onto the Incorta platform. It is interesting sometimes, and it can, sometimes be fun to play around with data that you download from different sites. But I really want to make sure that if I'm going to use this, that I can pull from places that I'm likely to want to go into in real life, in the real world. So I'm going to pull from a SQL Server database. That is one of the things I want to go to. And then a couple of data repositories. Again, I want to get a little bit more enterprise worthy than just, the C drive on my laptop. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to an S3 bucket on AWS or Amazon Web Services, and I'm going to go to a Google Drive. It's just a couple of different enterprise repositories that are in fairly common usage. Here at PMsquare, we have a pretty strong AWS presence. But Google Drive, a lot of customers use that, and you can't deny that Google's a popular place to store data as well. When I go out and look for sample data, a lot of stuff is just available out there on Drive, as well as a lot of legit data. So in any case, I'm going to set for myself the 150 million criteria. It's got to be able to process a pretty good volume, and I've got to get that from 3 different enterprise worthy repositories, and I want to do it fairly quickly. So I will tell you, I've run through this a couple times, so I've got some notes. Just as if we were coming out to do this, at a customer site, we would do a little reconnaissance and beforehand get some database connection information, and get network traffic set up, and VPN access, whatever we need to do to get rolling. So I've done some of that scouting ahead of time. You're going to see that come to fruition. And I've worked with this data before, so I have a fairly good idea of what I'm going to see. So when I say 150 million, that's not an accident. That's what we're going to see in our SQL Server database. But let's go ahead and get started, and we'll walk through a little bit more about what this means, the unified data platform, and what Incorta does and how it does it along the way. But the first thing I'm going to do is click on the Start for Free button. And I've got an email saved, but I need to change it. So bear with me just a moment. And I'll go ahead and sign up. All right, now Incorta is going to send me an email to activate this free trial, and I'm going to go find that email. Got back here, I've got a couple out there already, but I'm going to find a new one. Congratulations. Activate. Okay, let's give ourselves a password. Oh, it is very difficult to get these to match normally. Uh, when I'm trying to say it in front of people, it's even harder, but I got the green check marks, so away we go. Right now, what Incorta's doing when we were watching this little progress meter spin and we get that email is it's going out and it's creating an instance for us. And what's important to know about the instance is it's a full-blown instance. So we're not getting a light version. We're not getting a version where some of the valuable features that we want are disabled until we give them a credit card or anything like that. We're getting the full boat here. There we go. Click on next. I'll be in other today. All right. And although Google is nice to offer to save that, I don't think I'm going to take it up on there. All right, so when Incorta says they can get you up and running quickly, we're up and running quickly. We're literally up and running right now. We have an Incorta instance. It is a full-blown instance. We won't go through everything, but if I click over here, you see the Cloud Admin portal. That's going to open up another tab. This is my Incorta cluster allocated to me. It's a small that will bounce up if we need to. Excuse me. We've got all the options to do the configurations. If you're familiar with Incorta, you'll know what this cluster management console or CMC is. If you're not, that's where you manage different things like the tenant configurations, default configurations, if you want to hook up to different outputs, if you want to enable different lab feature functionality, etc. Uh, but for the purposes of this presentation, it's important to know that it exists in here and we're not being held back. Right? This is our enterprise instance that we can start working with right away. Okay. Now, like I said, we're not going to. I'm just going to close this tab down and come back home. But here we are. Now, again, it would walk through everything that you can walk through on your own if you're interested in this. You can see on the left-hand side over here, there's the online store. That's the Incorta samples. Start with the sample dashboards. They're based on the online store. And if we go out and look, we're going to find that in the image that Incorta used to create this, it put the data out there. So that is uploaded data, just files uploaded to the Incorta server. Some of it's sitting out there in a database. We're not going to use online store. We want to do our own, right? Because we're going to put this to the test. But if you just want to get in and kick around with Incorta, I don't know how long I've been talking now, about 5 or 6 minutes, and we're already there, right? You can already go see what it can do and what it'll look like. As I said, though, we're here to put this to the test. So I'm going to keep rolling. And we'll walk back over some of that, what Incorta is and how it's working and what it does for us as we go through here. But I want to keep moving. So I'm going to click on this tab out here that says data, which is just what it sounds like. Incorta saying, hey, how are you going to get data to me, to the Incorta platform? And you can see that some of this in the image is already built for us. There's our online store sample, right? If I click on this where it says local data files, there's a bunch of stuff that's been uploaded to the server. But I don't want to use Incorta's pre-built stuff. I want to build my own. So I'm going to go ahead and click add data source. And the first thing we'll notice is there's a lot of data sources available to us out there. Obviously, we can upload files. You got Salesforce out here, NetSuite, Oracle for Business, all kinds of cool stuff. There's Apache Hive. I want to use SQL Server, so I'm going to click on that, but I'll just scroll down real quick. Some of these repositories we can use, different query services, all the way down at the bottom, there's custom stuff, and hey, Google Sheets, we can touch that. So quite a lot. I think on their homepage, they give you a number of connectors, but that number grows. It seems like every day they're talking about how many connectors they have, and it's a larger number than the day before, which is really kind of neat. We're going to stick with tried and true SQL Server. Like him. Okay, I've got a name and password, and let's see if I've done this correctly. Oops. Well, I'll ask you to bear with me and apologize to you. So my Control C, Control V skills are somewhat lacking apparently. All right, let's give this a name. PMsquare AWS SQL Server. If it looks a little bit odd, like I'm squinting and trying to see where I'm going, it's because the camera's right in my way. I'm trying to see the full screen around the camera. But you saw we had the successful test out there. So I'm going to click OK on that. All right. And that tells Incorta, okay, now, Incorta, you know how to go back out and you talk to the SQL Server on this database. All right. Now, again, bear with me. We'll walk back into the connections in just a moment, but I'm going to use that connection straight away. I'm going to create a schema. Now, you notice out here there's a schema and there's a business schema. So schema is the kind of what we would call the physical extraction layer. How are we going to get that data to Incorta? Okay. I'm not a big wizard fan, but I'm going to use a wizard for this. And let's call this our PMsquare AWS SQL schema because I'm not terribly original here. All right, I just chose that data source that we just connected to, right? Now what Incorta is saying is, hey, within that data source, I found a Go Sales database that we defined. These are all the schemas underneath that. Which one do you want? Um, if you've ever seen me teach a class or taken a class that I've taught, this will be real familiar. It's just a really easy way that's pretty understandable and consumable to show off products. So let's see here. Anything else I want? I think that's going to be fine. Product types, product lines and products, order methods, countries, regions, branches. Let's see. Did I get the region in there? Sales region. I'm going to bring that guy in too. All right. Now, you could see what Incorta did was it went out and it looked at the different pieces of metadata, pulled in some of that here. We could add information to this if we wanted to add in the label and make that a little bit more legible. If we said, well, I don't need all these different languages for my sales region names, I can start unchecking things. We could take care of that in a bit if that's something that we're interested in, but we want to get this done quickly, right? That was our whole goal here. So I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to let Incorta create these joins for me. You can see the checkbox, create the joins between the selected tables. Like a lot of tools that looks at metadata, this is going to go ahead and take a guess based on the foreign key, primary key relationships. And as we look across here, let's see what it's got. 9 tables we brought in. It created 8 joins for us. If we want to see what those joins look like, I'll click on the diagram. And something again, it's not terribly complex. It looks pretty familiar to us. All right. Now, what's important if we look across, right, we've got 9 tables and 8 joins, 0 rows of data, which sounds a little bit alarming for a test, right, where I'm going to get 150 million rows. But we talk about Incorta and the unified data platform. This isn't a tool that's going to model and then query the data from SQL Server. What Incorta wants to do is query those SQL Server tables, bring that data back to Incorta. It's going to work some magic. It's got some compression algorithms that it's going to use. It's going to compress those down into some files sitting on the Incorta Cloud on their server. It's going to do a thing called direct data mapping, which is going to define or implement the joins that we've defined between these files or tables. And some indexing and aggregation type stuff. It's kind of their proprietary magic, the black box. But what it's going to do is make it really fast when Incorta goes to try to query this stuff. And because it's all in-house, so to speak, right? It's on the same server. We don't have to worry about, run off to AWS and try to get to that SQL server and drag all this data across the network. That's already been done. But we do have to get the data here. And to do that, I'm going to click on load and I'm going to do a full load here. All right. Now that full load is simply a way of saying, hey, go get all the data. It's a little bit different than sometimes we want to do an incremental load. We don't have that set up here. But if you've got sales and you just want to pull in the last day's sales and you don't want to load the whole table every time, either for keeping the history intact or for performance reasons or extract time kind of considerations, Incorta does provide that kind of functionality. It's just for the moment and for what our test is, we just want to bring in these rows and start working with it and see how fast we can do it. But it is worth noting that we do have that functionality to be able to do incremental loads or kind of change data capture functionality available to us. Right. I'll tell you what, while that's loading, I hadn't planned on doing this, but I'm going to do it just for kicks. I'm going to use that schema wizard one more time. SQL Server second. Use my same data source. And this time, instead of just picking out those tables, I'm going to bring everything in from Go Sales. Right? I'll let it create the schema and create the joins just like I did before. And the reason I wanted to do that was just to point out, right, it's a little bit more complex, right? The volume of data is not going to go up tremendously, although it will go up, right, because we've got more tables and we've got a couple of their smaller size fact tables in there. But you can see it's more complex as we walk through. And it's nice to know that Incorta isn't affected by that um, in terms of performance. Now, there are some modeling considerations we're going to have to take into account. And, it's easy to say, hey, just point it at the database, get the model, plus play, and we're good to go. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. If we wanted to put this into play and do analysis from it, there's some work that we would have to do to make that happen. But I did want to show it off. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do in the background is go ahead and let that load up too. Okay. All right, so while Incorta is offloading those two schema, right, you can see here's the progress. It's extracting both of those. It's going off and doing its thing. We said we wanted to bring data in from the SQL Server. We're doing that. We also want to go back out and pull in the data from S3 and from AWS, right? Now, I mentioned having done some homework. This is part of it. I hope I'm not giving away anything terribly valuable here, but this is our PMsquare AWS S3 bucket that I built, or excuse me, I had built for me. I asked for it. And you can see I've got a couple of files in here that's got 5 million sales records, right? What's important is this folder name. I'm not going to memorize that, right? That's something that got built for me when I subscribed to a data set. So that's nice, but I built this file out here. What I need to know though is how do I get here from Incorta, right? So I've already gone back out. I talked to our AWS guy. He helped me out with getting this set up and creating the folders and whatnot. And I know how I can attach to that through different kinds of interfaces. I need to be able to do it here in Incorta too. It's not difficult, but we need to know how to do it. That's part of that homework that we've done. So what I'm going to do is come out here to the data tab. I'm going to do a new data source again. And I'm going to scroll up and down here. I'm just looking for the S3 bucket. If it's not sitting in database, you want to have fun sometimes, start asking people in the bleeding edge of this stuff, what constitutes a database anymore? And they'll wax philosophic about how AWS S3 can be used as a database. And it's not just an RDBMS server anymore, and et cetera. But it's not out here under databases. Let's see, there's my Google Drive, but that's not what I want. Aha. And Corda has categorized that under data lake, right? So here we go. I talked about doing that homework. What I need here to get to this data lake is a key and a secret key. Now those, having done my homework, I've got that written down. So I'm going to copy the key right over here. And I'm going to copy the secret key, but because it's a secret key, we'll leave that all asterisks. Pretty clever. All right. Now this S3 bucket here, you can see it says path to root directory on it. And that is what we want. So there's my S3 bucket. Even though I want to get to these files, what I want to do with the connection string is get to the root, right? Where does this start? Where does my data start before I get into all the subfolders and whatnot? And that's back here at this bacon and Corda bucket, right? Now, I will tell you, you can copy this URI and you can pop that in here. And that's going to give us a lot more URI than we want. I'll just come back out here to the root. There we go. And if you're like me, you're going to click OK on that and get really frustrated when it doesn't work. I did do that. But if we look at the help, Incorta wants their URL with that A after the 3. So if we want to make that work, we got to have the A in there. And it's not the way that you copy it from AWS. If you look on the Incorta community and search for AWS bucket and troubleshooting, you'll find a question about that. The author of that question was me. And I got frustrated with it and asked a question on community and then immediately answered it because as soon as I asked it, I looked at the help documentation and found that I was doing it wrong. So let's call this PMsquare AWS S3. We'll test it out. There we go. Test was successful. Click OK on that. right? Google's being very helpful. And then while we're here, we'll go ahead and create our data source for our Google Drive as well, right? Here's Incorta asking me if I need any help. Not right at the moment, thank you. PMsquare G Drive. And it's going to ask me for some credentials. And I'm going to go ahead and log in here. Go ahead and give Incorta the right to look at my stuff. All right, so now I'm authorized. In my Google Drive, I've created that Google Drive with this account. You can see I've got some different files out there, but I've created two folders underneath my drive. One is called Incorta Source Files. You'll kind of guess what's in there. And the other one is called Really Important Not to Share Stuff, right? And I did that specifically so that when we look back here at our data source, I'm going to click on Browse, and I don't want to just click on My Drive and click OK, because I don't want anybody that's able to get to this data source and create schema to be able to go to my Really Important Not to Share folder. So I'm going to create the root as the Incorta source files. You can see there's some subfolders underneath there, and that's okay. I'm willing to let the people go back out and model against those, but I don't want them to get the other ones. So I'm going to just start from here, the Incorta source files, and I'll click OK on that. Give that a test. Success. Right? And I'll click OK again. All right. So looking along, I've been talking for about 20 minutes. I do have my three sources. I've got SQL Server loading up out there. We'll take a look and see what the progress is on that. I connected successfully, and I haven't pulled any data in, but I've connected successfully to S3 and Google Drive. Let's take a look and see here. All right, well, we're still extracting for that second set of SQL Server tables, but looks like Incorta is going through its post-loading process. That's the compression and the direct data mapping, all that fun stuff that Incorta does to make things work quickly for us. While it's doing that, let's create a new schema. Now, while I'm creating this new schema, I'll mention as well, there is a whole set of best practices that goes along with creating these things. So I'm creating them in separate places just so we can load them separately and kind of see them separate places in this this quick demonstration that we're doing. But there are some real considerations to make. That physical query layer, sometimes you have predecessor successor restrictions where you have to load one table because you're going to build a materialized view off of it, or you want to build one table because you're going to use that table to populate a parameter, right, to get a date or a last load date or most recent order date, something like that. Excuse me. So um, for our purposes, we're just testing with those criteria we mentioned before. This works fine, just popping in these different schema. But, excuse me. Where in the world was I at? I was, bear with me. I should do one thing at a time here. All right, so looking at the file system, I'm going to look at my Google Drive, select a file, go into my Bacon folder. Yeah, let's get these 5 million records. All right, add that. So we do want to, before we start building this out in a way that might be used as we go into an enterprise implementation, just beyond the testing phase, take a look at what those best practices are, reach out, to PMsquare or to Incorta, take a look at their community, and find out maybe what we should be doing and what a good way to plan for that is. There really are some good considerations to think about for that. Excuse me. Okay. Now, the other thing is we're just building these things, as we said, the physical schema layer. There is this option over here to the left of it called business schema. And that's our, say, semantic layer, right? Where you can put nice, pretty names on here. Now, the Great Outdoors doesn't have terrible database name and table and column names, but a lot of applications do, right? If you start looking at your SAPs of the world or other ERPs with kind of codes and not real human readable table names or column names, it's something you want to maybe start thinking about. How do we make that user friendly? And that's where that business schema comes into play. All right, let's Google Drive sales records. Click on done here. We'll load that up. All right. Yeah, we said we were going to create one more, so I'm going to go ahead and do that too. Schema. This will be our PMsquare S3 sales data. That was our data lake, was the S3 bucket here. All right, now those are CSV files. Unlike the Google Drive where we could browse to that, this is asking us for that file path. May still have it in here, I sure do. Now, important to know that file path is not looking for this entire URL because it already knows where to start. Remember, we put the root directory in there. I'm going to take the root directory out of this, and here's the rest of the path, right? Now, that's just taking me to sample test files. So let's get one more of these. Copy the URI back in here. Let's run through this again. There we go. Click on add. That's going to go out, get our information from that S3 bucket. Right, as long as we're here, let's go ahead and load that too. All right, now we've got everything loaded. We'll just go back out here and take a look. Yeah, there's our SQL schema, right? Out there, it's been successful. The second's been successful. Let's take a look at the information we can see here. And as I look, it took just under 10 minutes, 9 minutes 16 to load, all right? 150 million rows of data, just under 4 gigs sitting on the server, right? And now this data is available inside Incorta. We can go start exploring that and start doing some analysis, seeing how that's going to work, and really start making sure that, hey, when we pulled this in, we're getting what we want to get, right? So it's nice knowing that we can connect to different sources and see different things. It's really nice to know that we can use that data once we've done so. We'll see that in just a minute. I do want to go back out and see our second. And it looks like we added about 4 million. So we're at 154 million on here. So what's that? 300 million we're at rows of data. So success for that specific set of criteria that I have, where I was looking at volumes of data that represented something more real world than an Excel spreadsheet or a file upload. Yeah, 300 million. Our text files out here are going to add another 10 on top of that. So pretty decent result. Let's take a look at this and explore this data. Now I see here's a little navigation hint. All of this is a lot to scroll through. If you click on these 3 dots up here, you can collapse that down. And now we know about 134 million of these order details. Let's just see if it can run through that and what it looks like here. Excuse me. Let's bring in the country as well, as long as we're doing this. Okay. Spin, spin, spin. Incorta, come on now. Table level. All right. So while Incorta is chewing that data, it's going out and reading it. Excuse me, reading some of this stuff into memory and first use, and working with it. This is the Incorta analytics interface. It's using the analytics engine for this. And what it's going to do is it's going to, like I said, read that data. It's going to start rendering it. Here's our simple list we want to look at. And we're not limited to the list, as we can see on here. This is literally every row of data that's in that fact table. And then we brought the country in as well, just so we could see that join work. That's not terribly valuable. But if I aggregate that data, and you saw how fast it ran through those 134 million records and aggregated to that country level, right? aggregating my unit price, unit sale price. We have the functionality you would expect to have, right? So by default, it's summarizing or summing these things. But if I wanted, say, instead of the unit sale price to be summed, I could grab the average. Boom, you see, now I'm looking at averages instead of sums. So here's the real magic of Incorta. That data is sitting on the Incorta server. We've done the direct data mapping. Now it's read out into memory, so it's really fast. But even when it's not, it's sitting out there on the file, so we don't have to run to the SQL server to get that data. And we could start putting this into dashboards and insights, which we call the different panes on the dashboard, in different ways. Something like this, where it's a simple list. A lot of my colleagues here at PMsquare really hate pie charts, so of course we're going to demo one here and see our beautiful pie. I prefer donuts, so we get a donut chart, but you get the idea. We can start rolling through this and see this data looked in different ways, right? So now we've got our measures out here grouped by country. Maybe let's throw the order method in here, see what that looks like. And again, Incorta's churning through that data, able to pull it in really quickly. Let's get rid of this, pull the order method up here. We can just see these pieces of information sliding through really fast. And we're not limited to one group, of course. We can do a bunch of them. The important thing to know here is that we were able to get from nothing, we literally started off saying, hey, I want to start this for free, to here's Incorta doing some analysis, glancing at the clock, and it looks like we're at about a half hour, right? 31 minutes later. So pretty nifty stuff. Now, having said that, I do want to drop back here into the modeling bit. Go back into our model. This model, the PMsquare AWS SQL Server model, works really nicely because we brought in these 9 tables, and these 9 tables joined together all slick, right? I did mention, if we look at the second one, where there are more tables in here, now I've got 27. If I start to go out here and explore this, I can get to the same place. Remember our navigation trick where it's going to collapse that. And where are my order details? I won't pull in quite so many this time. I'll just get the quantity out there and maybe the unit sale price. And we'll get the country, just like we did before, churning through our 134 million rows. Come on, Incorta. Moments from now, there we are, aggregated, right? Very similar to what we saw before. Let's bring in some other information. I'm going to break this up by product number as well. Now, there are a lot of products, so we're going to see this screen change pretty significantly, but it's going to roll through that data, and you can see now grouping by country and then product, giving us the total quantity and the total unit sale price for the product number, right? So far, so good. But if I come out here to the product name lookup, and I try to bring in the product name, right? All of a sudden we're not seeing much, right? Sometimes you'll see it like this. Sometimes you'll see the error message, but something's amiss here. We know that these products aren't just numbers, right? They should have names. You remember we talked about it being a little bit more complex of a diagram, a little bit more complex of a schema when we have more tables and they weren't all joined in the same way. That's what I meant about having to do some work, right? So we use that wizard to bring this in, but if we really want to be able to look at all these tables in conjunction, this diagram is going to have to be simplified a little bit. We're going to have to make sure we understand how the Incorta joins work and how that query engine works in order to bring back the correct result. We'll cover this in a later session. If you get modeling questions, or if you're seeing this when you test it out and you see blanks or you see an error and you're, hey, why are there zeros here? I know there aren't zeros in the database, or why aren't I seeing product names as we're seeing in this case? Hey, ask the question in the QA session, ask the question to PMsquare, ask it on the Incorta community. If we get good ones and we have different modeling questions and we can get so either some sample data to mock up that question, or some data where it's been masked sufficiently so that either you're willing to share it or we can cobble some together to address the issue. We'll put that in a future video and kind of make some of those available on our YouTube channel so we can see some of the different modeling challenges. Uh, I'm going on now. This really wasn't a video. This wasn't really a session about the modeling challenges so much as getting things together really quickly. So I'll tell you what, let me close that and get back to the successful stuff that we did, because we have, in fact, gone through our 300 million rows of SQL Server database. Our drive and our um, there's our S3 data are out here. We can explore that data too. Right? In this case, it's all one table, so that's not terribly interesting. But let's just pull that in. 37 columns, right? 5 million rows of data. Let's go ahead and churn through here and let it think. There we go. Let's maybe group that by gender. Right now, this is a list. It's going to remain a list just because I pulled it up there. It doesn't change it into an aggregate table. But clicking on an aggregate table changes it to aggregate table. And you'll be able to see again, Incorta's going out there and boom, really quickly able to take that information and distill it into something that might be a little bit more interesting to us. Um, excuse me, or a little bit more useful in an analytic sense, right? All right, cancel that guy. All right, as I said, if you get questions about this or if you want to see it in action with your data, pretty easy to do. We just saw that happen. It's one of the really nice features about it is if I were to put this together, say we went out to a customer site, we put it together for a customer instead of using this fake data, and we decide it's the way to go. Yep, we like this. It's doing what we want to do. Let's make it available to a wider audience. We're gonna maybe set up that business schema for self-service. Schedule some things, have near real-time data in there for some kind of on-the-spot analysis. We're gonna do all that stuff. We don't want to lose it at the end of 30 days, right? Because we got this 39-day trial. But the beauty of that is when I decide that I like it and I'm ready to scale up and scale out, this button up here in the upper right that says upgrade is the way to do it. And so we don't lose the work that we've done. That's, becomes something that we started off with this as a test, but it becomes an investment that now we can build it the way we want to. So we're back to those best practices for modeling and for dashboarding, things like that. Really build that out well and not lose that work when we're done with the trial period. So pretty slick. Okay, as I say, stick around, ask questions if you want to through the comments. You can always reach us here at PMsquare. Incorta's got a wonderful community. If you go to Incorta.com or Google community for Incorta, I believe it's community.incorta.com. Really active there, answering questions. There's a lot of resources out there. You might tell, right? Incorta's a PMsquare partner. We like Incorta a lot, but one of the things I like about it is you can put it to a test in a video like this. And I'm glancing at the clock. It looks like we're coming up on 39 minutes. So 39 minutes later of clicking and me talking, and we've got something valuable that we can actually use to analyze data uh, or use to kind of leverage out and build out into something that's say consumer worthy for people that don't want the database level business, or excuse me, the database level schema. They want to look at that business schema and not really care about the tech stuff underneath it. We can build that out too. It's all available to us on this platform. All right, that having been said, I've been talking a long time. I'm going to let this go, but I hope to see you in future sessions and some future shows on the channel. Thanks.